A prestigious music school stood proudly in the heart of New York City. The building was grand, with tall pillars, polished floors, and rooms filled with the sounds of instruments being played from morning until night. Inside this school were some of the most talented and ambitious students in the country, all hoping to become great musicians one day. Along with them were teachers who were highly respected, strict, and dedicated to their art. One of these teachers was Mrs. Elaine Parker, a piano instructor who had been teaching for more than 30 years. She was known for her sharp eyes, no-nonsense attitude, and her love for perfection. She expected her students to work hard, be disciplined, and never make excuses. Elaine Parker didn't believe in second chances. If a student made a mistake during class, she would stop them immediately and make them start again. If they failed to practice, she would embarrass them in front of the whole class. She wasn't cruel, but she believed that music was a serious matter. According to her, if you couldn't give your heart and soul to it, you had no place in her classroom. The students respected her, some even feared her, but they all knew one thing. If you wanted to become great, Mrs. Parker was the one to learn from. While the students practiced their instruments and the teachers prepared their lessons, there was another person quietly moving through the hallways, someone almost invisible to the rest of the academy. Her name was Rosa Gutierrez, a janitor, who had recently been hired. Rosa was in her early 50s, with soft eyes, neatly tied hair, and a gentle smile. She always wore simple clothes and walked slowly, pushing her cleaning cart through the long corridors. Rosa hardly spoke to anyone. She came to work in the evening after most classes had ended, and she left before the school became busy in the morning. Her job was to mop the floors, dust the rooms, empty the trash bins, and clean the bathrooms. Most people didn't even notice her. The students were too busy with their music, and the teachers rarely interacted with the cleaning staff. Rosa never complained. She did her job quietly and respectfully. She was careful not to disturb anyone, especially when students were still practicing in the music rooms. But there was one room that always caught her attention: the grand piano room on the second floor. It was a large room with a beautiful black Steinway piano standing in the center. The floor shone like glass, and the walls were covered with soundproof panels. It was Mrs. Parker's room, where some of the most serious piano lessons took place. Rosa often passed by that room after it had been locked for the day. But sometimes, if she finished her work early and the hallway was empty, she would enter the room. At first, she only dusted the piano gently, her fingers running over the keys. Then, one night, she couldn't resist pressing a single key. The soft sound filled the silent room. She quickly looked around, feeling guilty, but no one was there. Slowly, her fingers pressed a few more keys. Her hands moved as if they remembered something from long ago. Her eyes closed, and for a brief moment, she forgot she was just a janitor. She wasn't cleaning anymore, she was playing. What Rosa didn't know was that Mrs. Parker sometimes stayed late in her office, which was down the hall. One night, as Elaine walked toward the piano room to collect some forgotten sheet music, she heard faint notes being played. At first, she thought, one of her students had sneaked back in. She opened the door quietly and was shocked to see Rosa sitting at the piano. Rosa was completely lost in the music. Her fingers moved gently but confidently. It wasn't perfect, but it was sincere and emotional. Elaine stood there for a few seconds, frozen in disbelief. Then her expression changed. She felt angry, not just surprised. To her, the piano room was sacred, meant only for those who had trained for years. How dare a janitor touch the Steinway? She stepped forward quickly, and Rosa, hearing the footsteps, stopped playing and jumped up from the bench. Her face turned pale as she realized who was standing in front of her. Elaine looked at her with cold eyes. "What do you think you're doing?" she asked sharply. I'm sorry," Rosa stammered. I didn't mean any harm. This piano is not for you," Elaine said firmly. You are here to clean. That is your job. Stick to it." Rosa nodded quickly, eyes lowered, her hands trembling. "Yes, ma'am. I won't do it again." Elaine walked to the piano and checked it, as if making sure nothing had been damaged. "You should know better," she said. "Don't let me catch you doing this again." Without saying anything more, she left the room, leaving Rosa standing alone. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Rosa looked at the keys one last time, and then slowly walked out, shutting the door behind her. That night, Rosa went home feeling more embarrassed than she had in years. She lived alone in a small apartment in Queens. It was modest but clean, filled with small plants and photographs of people she missed. She sat on her bed thinking about what had happened. She hadn't meant to upset anyone. She didn't even know why she had played. It had just come over her, like an old memory whispering in her fingers. She had promised herself that part of her life was over, but for some reason, she had allowed it to return for a few stolen minutes. The next day at school, nothing was said. Elaine didn't tell anyone, and Rosa continued her work as usual. But now, she made sure never to go near the piano again. If she passed by the room, she would quicken her pace. She avoided eye contact with Elaine, and the students still paid her no attention. But something had changed. Elaine, despite herself, couldn't stop thinking about what she had seen. The way Rosa played. It wasn't like a beginner. It wasn't polished, but it had feeling. That kind of feeling couldn't be faked. Yet she brushed the thought aside. She convinced herself it didn't matter. Talent meant nothing without training and discipline. And Rosa was just a janitor. Nothing more. Days turned into weeks. Rosa continued to work, unnoticed and unheard. But the memory of the piano stayed, with her. At night, when the city was quiet, she would hum old melodies to herself while washing dishes or folding laundry. She didn't have a piano at home. She hadn't played seriously in decades. But her love for music had never completely died. It had just been buried under years of hard work, sacrifice, and forgotten dreams. The music school continued to run like clockwork. Students practiced, teachers taught, and no one suspected that hidden among the cleaning staff was someone with a secret past. No one, that is, except Rosa herself. And even she wasn't sure if that part of her life was real anymore, or just a memory she had imagined. But life has a strange way of bringing hidden things to light. And sometimes it starts with a single moment, an unexpected sound, a door left slightly open, or a pair of hands playing a song no one thought they would hear. That moment had already happened, and though no one knew it yet, everything was about to change. The days at the music academy went on as usual. Students rushed from one class to another, carrying sheet music and instruments. Teachers moved with purpose, their eyes sharp and focused. The air was always filled with music, piano notes echoing. Through halls, violins practicing scales, singers warming up their voices. Amidst all this, Rosa continued her work as if nothing had happened. She quietly cleaned the rooms, emptied the trash, wiped the windows, and polished the floors. No one spoke to her much. No one asked her about her day or her thoughts. She liked it that way. She had learned to keep to herself. After that night with Mrs. Parker, she made sure never to go near the piano room again. The memory of that scolding still stung in her chest, but music is not something that can be easily forgotten, especially not by someone who has loved it deeply. Rosa didn't need to touch the piano anymore. She could feel the music in her head. Sometimes while cleaning, she would hum softly under her breath, just enough to keep herself company, never loud enough for anyone to hear. But music has a way of finding its way out, even when we try to hide it. Some students started noticing something odd. It was a small group of students who stayed late after their classes. They practiced into the evening when the building was mostly empty. One of them was Julia Martin, a bright and curious girl who played the cello. She was friendly with everyone and liked to stay late to perfect her pieces. One evening, after she packed her cello and started walking down the hallway, she paused. She thought she heard something, faint piano music coming from the second floor. It was soft, emotional, and hauntingly beautiful. At first, she thought it might be a recording left on in one of the classrooms, but as she walked toward the sound, it stopped. She opened doors quietly, looked inside, but found no one. The building seemed empty. She shook her head, thinking maybe she imagined it. But then it happened again the next day. And again the next week. Julia grew more curious. One evening, she decided to wait quietly in the hallway near the piano room. She hid around the corner, her cello case by her side, the lights dim. It was nearly 9 o'clock. Most of the academy was dark. Then she heard it again. The piano keys were being played slowly and gently. The melody floated down the hallway like a whisper. She stepped closer, her heart beating faster. Carefully, she peeked through the small glass window on the door. What she saw made her freeze. It was Rosa, the janitor, sitting at the grand piano. Her posture was straight. Her hands moved softly over the keys. Her eyes were closed, her face peaceful. She wasn't just playing random notes. She was playing music, real music, with soul and feeling. It was unlike anything Julia had ever heard from her classmates. It wasn't about perfection. It was about emotion, the kind of emotion that made your chest feel heavy and your eyes water. Julia watched for a few minutes, stunned. She had never even heard Rosa speak more than a few words. She had always seen her pushing her cleaning cart, carrying mop buckets, wiping windows, but here she was, sitting like she belonged on that piano bench. Like the room had been waiting for her. Suddenly, Rosa stopped playing and looked toward the door. Julia quickly stepped back, holding her breath. She didn't want to get Rosa in trouble or make her feel uncomfortable. She waited until she heard Rosa quietly leave the room and walk away. Only then did she step out and go home. The next day, Julia told two of her closest classmates what she had seen. One of them, Marcus, laughed. "The janitor? Playing piano? Are you serious?" "I'm completely serious," Julia said. "She was amazing." "You probably just heard a recording or something," the other girl, Tasha, said. "It wasn't a recording," Julia insisted. "I saw her with my own eyes. She plays like she has pain inside her." The others shrugged it off, not really believing her. But Julia couldn't stop thinking about it. She started staying late more often, hoping to hear Rosa play. Again. And she did. Sometimes for just 5 minutes, sometimes longer. And every time it was something new. Gentle melodies, sad harmonies, soft lullabies. Julia began recording the music secretly on her phone. She wanted to keep it, not to expose Rosa, but because it touched something inside her. Slowly, a few more students began to believe her. One night, Marcus followed Julia to the hallway and listened too. When he heard Rosa play, his face changed. He didn't laugh anymore. He stood silently, eyes wide. "She's really good," he whispered. "Why is she working as a janitor?" No one had the answer. Julia tried to speak to Rosa once. She approached her gently one afternoon when Rosa was cleaning the hallway. "Hi, Miss Rosa," she said with a kind smile. Rosa looked up, surprised. "Oh, hello," she said quietly. "I just wanted to say, you play the piano beautifully." Rosa froze. Her eyes widened in shock, and her hand gripped the mop handle tightly. I don't know what you mean," she said quickly. "I heard you," Julia said gently. "Don't worry, I won't tell anyone. I just wanted you to know that your music is special." Rosa looked down, her cheeks turning red. "I'm just the janitor," she whispered. "That's all." "But you're not just anything," Julia said softly. Rosa gave a small smile, one that looked like it hadn't appeared in years. But she said nothing more and walked away. That evening, Rosa didn't play. Julia felt sad. Maybe she had frightened her. Maybe she had ruined something by speaking. But 2 nights later, the music returned. Soft, cautious, but still there. Rosa was still playing. And now Julia wasn't the only one listening. A few more students had started to come, not to disturb her, but to sit quietly in the hallway, their backs against the wall, their eyes closed, just listening. Rosa never saw them. They made sure of it. It became their little secret. A secret. Concert by someone who didn't even know she had an audience. Still, no one dared tell any of the teachers, especially not Mrs. Parker. Elaine Parker continued her life the same way as always. She gave her students difficult pieces, criticized every mistake, and walked the halls with a look of authority. If she noticed Rosa, she gave only a brief nod. She never mentioned that night again, and she believed Rosa had stayed away from the piano, just like she was told. To her, the matter was finished, but deep inside, something small still bothered her. That image of Rosa playing the piano, the way she looked so lost in the music, it had left a mark. Elaine tried to ignore it, but every now and then she would think about it. And when her students played poorly, when they couldn't connect with the emotion of a piece, she would find herself strangely annoyed, as if comparing them to something she didn't fully understand. Meanwhile, Rosa continued her secret playing. She never touched the piano when anyone was nearby. She waited until the hallways were empty, the lights dimmed, and the building silent. Then she would sit, place her fingers gently on the keys, and let the music come out. She didn't do it to impress anyone. She didn't even know anyone was listening. For her, it was just a way to feel alive, a way to remember who she had been. She had once dreamed of becoming a concert pianist. She had studied in Mexico City at a music academy when she was young. She had been good, even great. But life had other plans. Her father became sick. She had to leave school to take care of her family. She worked in restaurants, cleaned houses, and later moved to America for better work. Her hands that once played music were used for scrubbing, sweeping, and lifting. Years passed, and the dream faded. But the love for music stayed hidden inside her like a candle burning quietly in the dark. And now in this school filled with rising stars and world-class teachers, she had found a piano again. Just for a few minutes at a time. Just enough to feel whole again. But secrets don't stay hidden forever. And soon, the quiet whispers among students would reach the wrong ears. What started as a moment of beauty in the dark was about to turn into something much bigger, something that would challenge the rules, shake the pride of teachers, and remind everyone at the academy that true music doesn't care about titles or uniforms. It lives in the heart, and Rosa's heart had been singing all along. Rosa's soft piano music had now become a secret treasure for a few students in the academy. Each evening, a small group of them gathered quietly outside the piano room. They never made a sound. They sat on the floor with their backs against the cold walls, bags on their laps, and hearts open to the music. No one spoke. No one recorded anymore. They just listened. And Rosa, unaware that anyone was there, kept playing as if the piano was her only friend in the world. Each time she sat at that piano, something deep inside her came to life. It was like a sleeping bird spreading its wings again. Her fingers moved gently, sometimes trembling, sometimes strong, but always with emotion. She played pieces from her past, songs she had learned as a girl in Mexico, and some she had created herself over the years. She never read sheet music. Everything came from her memory and her heart. Rosa's life was still hard. Her work didn't get easier, and no one from the staff treated her differently. But something in her steps had changed. She walked a little taller. Her eyes held a light that wasn't there before. Every evening, she waited for that moment when the halls became quiet, and she could return to that piano like a thirsty traveler returns to water. The students who listened to her music didn't know much about Rosa's life, but they felt something powerful in her playing. It wasn't like the strict lessons they received every day. It was soft, free, and full of emotion. They started wondering how someone like her, someone without a title or position, could play so beautifully. Some of them had been taking lessons for over 10 years, but none of their music had ever touched hearts the way Rosa's music did. Julia, the first one to discover Rosa's hidden talent, wanted to do something more. She didn't want this gift to remain a secret forever. One evening, after Rosa had finished playing and left the room, Julia stood up and looked at her friends. "We have to do something," she said. "People need to hear her. She doesn't belong behind a mop. She belongs in front of a piano." Marcus looked uneasy. "But Mrs. Parker already warned her once. If we say anything, Rosa might lose her job." Tasha nodded. "We have to be careful. What if they see it as breaking the rules?" Julia thought about that for a moment. Then she said, "What if we don't ask permission? What if we plan something ourselves? A surprise concert?" They looked at each other, unsure. "You mean, like an event?" Marcus asked. "Yes," Julia said with excitement. "We'll book a small hall inside the academy. We'll invite people secretly. She won't know about it until the moment she steps on stage." "But how will we get her there?" Tasha asked. "We'll think of a way," Julia said. "We'll write a letter or get a teacher to help us. Someone who still believes music is about heart, not just rules." The idea grew stronger in their minds. Over the next few days, they started planning. Quietly, they spoke to a few more students, asking them to keep it secret. Most were surprised to hear about Rosa's playing, but once they listened to the recordings or heard the stories, they were moved. Everyone agreed. They had to hear her for themselves. Meanwhile, Rosa continued her days as always. She mopped the floors, scrubbed the walls, and emptied trash bins. But every night the piano gave her strength. She didn't know students were listening. She thought she was alone in her little world, letting her soul speak through the keys. But one evening, everything changed. It was a Friday evening. Rosa had just finished her cleaning and was heading toward the piano room. She checked the hallway, as always, then quietly stepped inside. The lights were soft, the air still. She sat at the piano and placed her fingers on the keys. As she began to play, something felt different. The room felt warmer. She played a slow, emotional melody, one she had written long ago for her mother. It had no name, but it was filled with love and longing. As she reached the middle of the piece, she suddenly stopped. Something didn't feel right. She turned her head slowly toward the door. The hallway light flickered. She stood up, walked to the door, opened it gently, and gasped. There were students standing there. Not just 3 or 4, but maybe 15 or 20. Some had tears in their eyes. Some clapped slowly. Some looked at her like they had seen a miracle. Rosa stepped back, confused. What is this?" she said softly. Julia stepped forward with a gentle smile. "Miss Rosa, we've been listening. For weeks. Your music, it's beautiful." Rosa's face turned pale. "No," she whispered. "I wasn't supposed to. I didn't mean to. Please don't tell anyone." Marcus spoke up. "We already know, and we're not here to get you in trouble. We want to do something else, something good." Rosa was speechless. She didn't know whether to cry or run away. She looked at the faces in front of her, young, hopeful, kind. Julia stepped forward again and held out a small folded paper. "We're planning a student performance night next week. But we want it to be more than that. We want you to be the final performer." Rosa stared at the paper as if it was something dangerous. "No," she said, shaking her head. "I can't. I'm just the janitor. People won't understand." "They will," Julia said firmly. "Because they'll hear you. And once they hear you, they'll understand everything." Rosa stepped back. "I haven't performed in decades. I haven't been on a stage since I was young. I don't even know if I can do it." "You already are doing it," said Tasha gently. "Every night. You're playing better than half the students here." "But Mrs. Parker," Rosa began. "We won't tell her," Marcus said. "At least not yet. Just think about it. Come and play. Let the world hear you again." Rosa took the paper with shaking hands and looked down at it. It had the event's date and time. An evening of hidden talent, Thursday at 6:30 p.m., room 212. She said nothing more that night. She walked away slowly, the paper still in her hand. That weekend, Rosa didn't sleep much. She sat at her small kitchen table and stared at the invitation. She thought of her mother, her old piano teacher in Mexico, the dream she once had. Was it still possible to wake that dream up again? She practiced every night, not in the school, but at home on a small keyboard she had kept hidden under her bed. It was old and dusty, but it worked. Her fingers stumbled at first. She cried more, then once, but the music came back, slowly, gently, like an old friend knocking on the door. On Thursday evening, Rosa wore her best clothes, a simple black dress and a gray shawl. She brushed her hair neatly and walked to the academy with trembling hands. The hallway to room 212 was lit with soft lights. She could already hear people talking inside. Her heart raced. Julia met her at the door. "You came," she whispered, smiling. "I almost didn't," Rosa admitted. "But you did," Julia said. "And that's what matters." Inside the room, the audience was already seated. Around 50 students had shown up. Some teachers were there too, curious about the event. On the board at the front of the room were written the words, "Music from the Heart." One by one, students performed their pieces. There were guitar solos, violin performances, piano duets. People clapped kindly after each performance. Then, Julia stood up and walked to the front. "Before our final performer comes up," she said, "I want to share a story. A few weeks ago, I stayed late to practice. I heard piano music coming from a room I thought was empty. When I looked inside, I saw someone playing with more emotion than I had ever seen in my life. That person wasn't a teacher. She wasn't a student. She was someone we've all walked past every day without truly seeing." The room grew quiet. Her name is Rosa Gutierrez. She cleans our floors, empties our bins, and keeps this academy beautiful. But tonight, she is going to show us something even more beautiful. Her heart. The students clapped, some already wiping tears from their eyes. Rosa stepped forward slowly. The room felt like it was spinning. She sat at the piano, closed her eyes, and began to play. At first, her hands trembled, but then the music took over. She played the same melody she always played late at night. This time it was stronger, bolder, fuller. The room was silent except for the piano's voice. It spoke of struggle, hope, sadness, and strength. It told the story of a woman who had once dreamed, lost everything, and then found her music again. When she finished, no one moved. Then someone stood and clapped, then another. Soon the whole room stood up in applause. Rosa looked out at the crowd, her eyes full of tears. She smiled, not the small, polite smile she gave while working, but a real one, filled with pride. What she didn't know was that standing in the back of the room watching silently was Mrs. Elaine Parker, her face unreadable, her arms crossed. But in her eyes was something unexpected. Not anger, not disapproval, but a quiet sense of surprise and something close to respect. Rosa stood, bowed gently, and walked off the stage. She felt like she was floating. For the first time in many years, she wasn't invisible. And deep inside her heart, something whispered, "It's never too late to be seen." When Rosa walked off the small stage that night, her legs were trembling. Her heart was still racing from the performance. For a moment she thought maybe it had all been a dream. But the claps still echoed in her ears, and the image of smiling students standing up and cheering her stayed in her mind like a bright light that wouldn't fade. She had not just played music, she had shared her soul. And for the first time in many years, people had truly listened. The students surrounded her in the hallway after the event. Some hugged her, others shook her hand, and many had tears in their eyes. Julia came forward and held Rosa's hands tightly. "You were amazing," she said. "I've never heard anything like that in my life." Rosa smiled shyly. "Thank you. I didn't know I could still play like that. I was afraid." "Well, now the whole academy knows the truth," Marcus said with a grin. "You're a real artist." For a few moments, Rosa forgot that she was the janitor. She felt like a musician again, a real one. The feeling was warm and unfamiliar, but also wonderful. Then suddenly, that warmth turned into a cold shiver as she noticed someone standing at the end of the hallway. It was Mrs. Parker. She had her arms crossed and her expression was hard to read. She didn't smile, didn't frown. She just stared at Rosa for a long moment. Then, without saying a word, she turned and walked away. Rosa's heart dropped. Her hands felt cold. The students saw her face change. "It's okay," Julia whispered. "We'll talk to her if she says anything. We'll stand up for you," but Rosa shook her head. "She's the head instructor. She makes the rules. I'm just the cleaner." "Not anymore," Julia said. "Not after tonight." But deep down, Rosa feared the truth. No matter how beautiful her music was, no matter how much students admired her, she wasn't part of the system. She didn't have a diploma from a fancy school. She didn't wear formal clothes or teach with textbooks. And worse, she had disobeyed a warning. The next morning, Rosa arrived earlier than usual. She wanted to finish her duties quickly before anyone else arrived. She avoided the main building and focused on sweeping the courtyard. But she didn't get far before one of the assistant staff members approached her. "Mrs. Parker wants to see you in her office," he said without emotion. Rosa froze. Her broom slipped from her fingers and hit the ground with a soft thud. She picked it up slowly, nodded, and walked toward the main office. With each step, her mind filled with thoughts. Maybe they were going to fire her. Maybe they would say she had embarrassed the academy. Maybe Mrs. Parker was angry that a janitor had dared to step onto a stage meant for trained musicians. When she reached the office, the door was already open. Mrs. Parker was sitting behind her desk, glasses on, a file open in front of her. She didn't look up immediately. Rosa stood silently at the doorway. Finally, Mrs. Parker spoke. "Come in." Rosa walked in and stood near the chair but didn't sit. Mrs. Parker looked up. "You performed last night." "Yes," Rosa said, softly. "I'm sorry. The students, they asked me. I didn't mean any harm." There was a long pause. Mrs. Parker closed the file. "I remember your face now," she said slowly. "Years ago you came here for an interview. You said you wanted to be a piano teacher. You even played something, and I turned you away." Rosa nodded. "You said I didn't have the proper qualifications." Mrs. Parker tapped her pen on the desk. "At the time, we had a strict policy. We only hired instructors with degrees from recognized institutions. It wasn't personal." "I understand," Rosa said. There was another pause. Then Mrs. Parker looked directly at Rosa. "You played beautifully last night. I stayed for the entire performance." Rosa looked up, surprised. "I was impressed," Mrs. Parker continued. "It's rare to hear music like that these days. Pure, emotional, not perfect, but real." Rosa said nothing. Her hands were shaking behind her back. "But rules are rules," Mrs. Parker added. "You are not on staff as a music teacher. And after our previous conversation, you chose to use the piano room without permission." Rosa felt her heart sinking again. So this was it. The praise was only to soften the punishment. Mrs. Parker folded her hands. You leave me with a choice. I can report this to the board and let them decide. Or, I can suggest another path. Rosa blinked. Another path? Mrs. Parker stood up and walked to the window. The academy is changing. The students want more than just theory. They want to feel something. Your performance sparked something in them. I received 5 emails from parents this morning asking about the mystery pianist their children can't stop talking about. Rosa stared in shock. Mrs. Parker turned back to her. If you are willing, I can offer you a temporary position as a guest performer and assistant. Not a full teacher yet. But you'll assist with special classes, show students your style, and perform occasionally? Rosa's mouth fell open. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. You'd really allow that? Mrs. Parker gave a small nod. I'm not doing it out of charity. I'm doing it because I think this place needs you. But you'll need to prove yourself further. No shortcuts. Are you ready for that? Rosa swallowed hard. Her eyes were wet. Yes, she said. I'll do anything. Good, Mrs. Parker said, sitting back down. We'll start next week. I'll inform the janitorial supervisor. You'll split your time for now. But if things go well, we'll see. Rosa walked out of that office in a daze. Her feet barely touched the floor. She wanted to shout, to dance, to cry. Instead, she walked quietly to the small storage room where she kept her cleaning supplies. She sat on the wooden bench and let the tears come. Not of sadness, but of hope. The news spread quickly through the student body. Everyone was thrilled. Julia and the others couldn't stop smiling when they saw Rosa the next day. You did it, Tasha said. You're really going to teach here. Only part-time for now, Rosa said modestly. But it's a start, Marcus said. That's more than most people ever get. Rosa's first class was small, just 5 students. She was nervous. She didn't have a fancy lesson plan. She didn't have a long list of rules or exercises. Instead, she sat at the piano, looked at the students and asked, "Why do you play?" They gave different answers. To make my parents proud. Because I want to go to a music school. Because I like the sound. Rosa smiled and said, "Good. But now I want you to close your eyes and play something from inside you. Don't think. Don't worry about wrong notes. Just play what your heart wants to say." At first, they were confused. Then, one by one, they tried. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. That was the beginning of a new kind of class. One where mistakes were allowed, as long as they were real. One where emotions were more important than exams. Students began coming to Rosa's sessions more than the required ones. Even some teachers started watching from the back of the room. Rosa still cleaned in the mornings. She didn't mind. She said it helped her stay grounded. But in the afternoons, she taught music. Not just notes and rhythm, but feeling. One afternoon after class, she sat at the piano alone again. The room was empty. She played the same melody she had played the first night Julia had heard her. But this time, she smiled while playing. She didn't hear the door open behind her. Mrs. Parker walked in quietly and stood by the wall. When Rosa finished, she turned and saw her. "That piece," Mrs. Parker said. "What is it called?" "It doesn't have a name," Rosa said. "It's just something I made for my mother a long time ago." Mrs. Parker nodded. "It should have a name. You should write it down, share it." "I don't know how to write music very well," Rosa admitted. "Then let someone help you," Mrs. Parker said. "Your story deserves to be remembered." Rosa looked down at the keys. For the first time, she believed it might be true. In the weeks that followed, Rosa continued teaching. Her class grew. A newspaper wrote a small article about her. People from other music schools began asking to meet her. But Rosa never let it go to her head. She still mopped the hallways when she had time, still greeted everyone with the same quiet smile. But something had changed. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer just the janitor. She was Rosa Gutierrez, the woman who taught music not from a book, but from the heart. Rosa stood in front of the tall mirror inside the small room where she once used to keep her broom and mop. Now, this same room had a soft carpet, a music stand, a tiny couch, and her old but polished shoes lined neatly along the wall. It still had the smell of cleaning supplies, but now it also smelled of fresh flowers that the students brought her every week. A soft knock came at the door, and before Rosa could answer, Julia peeked in with a big grin on her face. "They're all waiting," Julia said. "Are you ready?" Rosa smiled nervously. "As ready as I'll ever be." This was no ordinary day. The academy had invited guests, parents, staff from other schools, and even some local media to attend what they called the Soul of Music evening. It was a celebration of art, and at the heart of it was Rosa. She wasn't just assisting anymore. She was the main event, and everyone knew it. As Rosa stepped out into the hallway, she saw students lining the walls, some whispering, some waving at her. It felt surreal. Not so long ago, these same students had walked past her without noticing her. Now they called her Ma'am Rosa, with respect and love. In the main auditorium, the lights were soft, and the grand piano stood in the center of the stage. This was the same stage where famous performers had once played. Now it was Rosa's turn. Her heart beat loudly as she stepped onto the wooden floor. The room fell silent. Hundreds of eyes were on her. Her fingers felt cold, but her soul felt warm. She sat down, took a deep breath, and placed her fingers gently on the keys. For a moment, the world disappeared. All she could feel was the memory of her mother, her little apartment, the long years of loneliness, and the deep love she still held for music. Then she began to play. Her music was not showy or fast. It was soft, like a whisper in a quiet room. Each note told a story. The audience didn't just listen, they felt. People leaned forward, holding their breath. Some closed their eyes. A few wiped tears from their cheeks. The song Rosa played had no name, no printed sheet. It was something she had carried inside her for years, waiting for the right moment to be shared. When the last note faded, there was a moment of complete silence. Then the entire auditorium erupted in applause. People stood up, clapping loudly, cheering her name. Flowers were thrown. On stage, Rosa stood up, bowed deeply, and felt her chest fill with something she hadn't felt in years: peace. Backstage, the atmosphere was joyful. Mrs. Parker was there, her eyes shining behind her glasses. "You've done something rare tonight," she said. "You reminded people why music matters." "Thank you," Rosa replied softly. "Thank you for giving me a chance." Mrs. Parker shook her head. "You earned it. Every note you played proved that." In the weeks that followed, Rosa became more than a teacher. She became a symbol. The story of the janitor who was secretly a master pianist spread across the town, then the country. A famous music magazine wrote an article about her. TV channels requested interviews. Music schools from around the country invited her for guest lectures. But Rosa didn't let it change her. She still walked the halls of the academy with a gentle smile. She still greeted the janitorial staff by name. She even helped them clean sometimes when they were short on hands. That humility made people admire her even more. Students from other cities started applying to the academy, just to learn from her. Her classes grew so big that they had to move them to the main hall. But Rosa didn't teach with strict notes and heavy rules. She taught through feelings, through questions like, "What are you trying to say with this piece?" Or, "What does your heart want to play?" She encouraged her students to find their own voice. Some struggled at first, used to copying techniques, but slowly, under Rosa's gentle guidance, they began to open up. Shy students became confident players. Nervous hands turned into bold fingers dancing across piano keys. One student, a boy named Leo, had failed twice to enter the Academy's advanced music program. He was about to give up. But Rosa took him in, listened to his music, and saw something in him. She worked with him patiently for months. That same boy later performed at a youth music competition and won second place. When asked what changed, he simply said, "Rosa believed in me." Rosa didn't just teach music. She healed hearts. One evening, after finishing her last class, Rosa sat alone in the old piano room where it had all begun. The same dusty room, with the scratched wooden floors. But now it was cleaned and filled with flowers and soft light. On the wall, someone had hung a framed photo of Rosa at her first Academy performance. Underneath, it read, "From silence to song, Rosa Gutierrez." As she sat playing a gentle tune, Julia walked in quietly and sat beside her. "Do you ever think about how far you've come?" Julia asked. "Every day," Rosa replied. "Sometimes I still feel like I'm dreaming." "You changed this place," Julia said. "Before you, we only knew one way to learn. Now we feel something more." Rosa smiled. "Music should never be only about rules. It should be about soul." Julia nodded. "There's something else. I heard Mrs. Parker is retiring next year." Rosa looked at Julia in surprise. "She's recommending you as the next head of the piano department," Julia added. Rosa's eyes widened. "Me? But I never even—" "You don't need to be like the others," Julia said. "You already proved who you are." The thought scared Rosa, but it also excited her. She had spent years hiding her gift. Now the world was opening up in ways she never imagined. 1 week later, the Academy held a special event called Stories Through Music. It wasn't just a performance. It was a chance for students to tell their stories through original pieces. Rosa sat at the front row, proud and emotional as one by one, her students performed their own music, full of mistakes, full of feelings, full of truth. When the last student finished, the audience clapped warmly. Then something unexpected happened. The students came back on stage and invited Rosa to join them. Confused, she walked up, and they handed her a small wrapped box. Inside was a leather-bound book with blank music pages. On the first page, someone had written in golden ink, "For Rosa Gutierrez, so the world can hear your music." Rosa's eyes filled with tears. She hugged the students one by one. That night, she began writing her first piece. This time, it would have a name. Months passed. Rosa's music was performed by students all over the country. Her first collection of piano pieces, titled Whispers of the Heart, was published and praised for its emotional depth. She was invited to speak at music festivals, where she told her story, not to show off, but to remind people that talent can live anywhere, even in silence, even in a janitor's heart. The little storage room where Rosa once kept her broom was now a music archive room named after her. New students were told her story on their first day. They were taught that music wasn't just about skill, but about honesty, about courage, and about never giving up on who you really are. Years later, Rosa stood once more on the same stage she had first played on. This time she wore a navy blue dress. Her hair had more gray in it, but her smile was the same. A young student sat beside her, ready to perform the piece Rosa had written long ago for her mother. Before the student played, Rosa spoke softly into the microphone. "I was once told to stick to cleaning. I'm glad I didn't listen." The audience smiled. Some clapped, some wiped away tears. And then the music began. And just like that, a new story was born from an old melody. Rosa Gutierrez had come full circle. Not just as a pianist, but as a woman who had turned rejection into rhythm, pain into passion, and silence into song.